Hello. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. In preparation, just before we get into it, if you haven't attended a collab event before, you'll know that we're very much about connecting with our speakers, but also connecting with one another. So if you didn't have a chance just yet, please, Mitch, drop our thread in the chat and go leave a wave or a intro about yourself on that chat. That'll just be the best way to connect with anyone else who is at the session today. And it's just a good time to expand your network and build your community. So again, Mitch, please drop that chat or drop that link in the chat a few times. Please go on if you have LinkedIn and just wave hello or share a introduction about yourself and then connect with the others that are here as well. We also ask that if you can, again, we are a very big group on just sharing with one another and answering one another and learning with and from one another, right? So of course, today we have Lewis Lin that we'll be hearing from, but a lot of y'all have things and experiences and advice to probably share as well. So if you have any questions, please toss them in the chat. And if you see someone else's question that you would like to answer, definitely respond, right? Because that'll help us ensure sort of a back and forth opportunity to just have conversation a little bit more throughout the talk. Another thing is that if you can, keep your cameras on if possible. I know that this is after work or during work hours for a lot of us. So if you're just trying to tune in, that's totally fine. But if you are at home, obviously keeping that camera on will help us have a more comfortable vibe when we're talking and stuff like that. And then lastly, in terms of the giveaway, we are going to be snapshotting everyone who is still here near the end of the talk. And then you will receive an email from us latest by tomorrow if you have won a few physical copies that we're giving out of Lewis's most recent book, which is also going to be the conversation of this talk. So I'll give it just a few more minutes. I'll repeat that spiel again, and then we'll jump right into it. Okay, we're at about the 130, 140 people range. So again, Lewis had and myself and Mitch and Beth and the collab team, we've prepared a wide variety of questions. So I want to make sure that we can actually get through to all of them. But again, once again, for new people that have joined, before we get started, thank you so much for attending the collab talk today. If you're not familiar with us, one of our team members is going to be sending a little bit more details, so I'm sure you'll get well acquainted. But we are an online school focused on delivering experiential training programs in product management, product design, and software engineering. We definitely believe that the best way to learn product is to build product, and that's ultimately what we're all about. So if you haven't attended a collab event in the past, you wouldn't know, but we are very much hey, this is a community kind of conversation, right? So again, if you ask a question, feel free to drop any questions or any comments in the chat. And if you can, definitely respond and engage with one another. Ultimately, we're all here to learn with and from one another. So it'll be a much better time if you are able to participate and also share your thoughts and get other people's feedback beyond just Lewis, myself, and the collab team. And lastly, we love being able to connect everyone that attends each and every single one of these events. The best way to do that is by clicking on the link that Mitch is dropping in the chat, Mitch from our team, and go drop an intro or just a wave on that thread, right? Then you can scroll through easily instead of scrolling through the Zoom chat and be able to actually connect with one another just because you've all attended this talk together. That being said, I am going to stop sharing my screen now and really get started, right? Because ultimately we are here for one thing and one thing only. So thank you all again so much for joining us today and for the next hour. Again, we're going to learn a lot and it's going to be a lot of fun. Ultimately, I am really excited to introduce our special guest, Louis C. Lin. He is someone that I actually met in person when I was in Seattle. And not only is he a accomplished entrepreneur, product person, but he's also obviously a prolific author whose works have topped the Amazon bestseller lists. He's made so many interesting contributions to the tech industry with roles at Microsoft, Google, and really his expertise spans across a multitude of domains, right? So again, luckily today we're able to talk to him about Be the Greatest Product Manager Ever, his latest book. And we're also super excited to be able to give away a few physical copies at the end of this session. So Louis, we're super eager again to hear about your latest book and the incredible journey you've had in the tech world. Can you tell us first a little bit about the inspiration behind writing Be the Greatest Product Manager Ever? Oh, Louis, you're on mute. You are still on mute. Oh, there we go. There we go. There we go. I've asked you to unmute.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hey, Helen, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about product management careers, moving up the career ladder. And then thank you to all of the attendees. I know some of you are based out in the East Coast and allowing me to cut into your evening time. It's an absolute blessing, so appreciate that. So going back to your question, Helen, what propelled me to write this book? Well, some of you might have known me for one of my other books, Decode and Conquer. It's a book about how to get ready for the product management interview. And naturally, as people were using the book to get ready for the product management interview, they would say, Louis, great news. I got the offer and I signed and I'm going to start, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to screw this thing up. And it's just all this imposter syndrome just kind of coursing through. And people were looking for advice as to how they could excel in their careers, not just at the interview. And so a light bulb just went up in my head. It's like, you know what? Maybe I should write a book about how they can move up the career ladder now that they've secured an amazing job offer.
Gotcha. And I mean, speaking of which, then, what do you think defines a great product manager?
Oh gosh, that's the whole essence of the book. It's the whole backbone of the Esteem framework. But before I introduce the Esteem framework, I'll just kind of keep it casual and say, when I think about being a great product manager, I use that term synonymously with product leaders. And just thinking about the product leaders that we're exposed to in the media, there's really three names that come to mind. Number one, Mark Zuckerberg. Number two, Elon Musk. And then number three, Satya Nadella. When I think about Mark Zuckerberg, my gosh, so formidable. People make comments about his demeanor, that he seems a little bit robotic, but maybe playing into that stereotype. When people say that he's robotic, he reminds me of the Terminator. If you guys remember that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that's one of the really great qualities about Mark Zuckerberg is that he's just relentless. Like he just doesn't give up. And I think about all the trials and tribulations, like all the times that he was dragged in front of Congress for privacy scandals, meddling with the US election, existential crises where Instagram was the cool kid on the block and Facebook wasn't, or Snap was the cool kid on the block and Instagram wasn't. He seems to have always made it to the other side. And the most recent example is really around TikTok, and also his big multi-billion-dollar bet on the metaverse. At least here in the US, it seems like Mark Zuckerberg wins again. His Instagram Reels is really starting to take off. And part of it's not all his credit. I'll just be frank. There's just so much fear amongst organizations and governments around China and China interference, and that's why this created an opening for Instagram Reels to take off. And so relentlessness, being able to persevere to the end, that's kind of the number one thing I think about with Mark Zuckerberg. Going with Elon Musk, Once again, another controversial character, but something that cannot be denied is his vision. I mean, who has the gravitas to say, like, you know what? We're going to completely revolutionize the auto industry and usher forward EVs. Or who has the gravitas to say, you know what? We're going to have this mission of building space rockets that go to Mars and comes back. And so that moonshot vision from Elon Musk is absolutely incredible. And then, of course, Satya Nadella, it'd be remiss to not include him. Unless NVIDIA has surpassed them, Microsoft is the world's most valuable company. And it's by no short measure Satya's brilliance. And the thing that comes to mind about Satya is his judgment is just so on point. It's just amazing. Like he just makes very, very few errors. And so, to be able to have perseverance, to have vision, but also to have good judgment allows him to just be so, so efficient.
If you had to pick one person out of the three that you just identified, who would you say that you would most desirably emulate if you had to pick one of the three?
I'd switch places with all three of them in a heartbeat. Like, who doesn't want to be the CEO of a multi-trillion-dollar company? It's a kind of a rarefied air. But I guess the easiest one to gravitate towards is Satya. I mean, not only is he a really successful leader, but definitely amongst the three, he has the deepest empathy. And for those of you who have had a chance to read his biography, you probably know that one of his sons, I think, suffers from cerebral palsy, and so that's probably some of the backstory of why he was able to just build such a deep reservoir of not only empathy but also patience for others, because it kind of starts from home. And so it's incredible. When you think about a hard-charging, powerful executive, you don't think of somebody who's very empathetic, who's somebody who can relate with a range of different people, but that clearly is Satya's strength. And then the other thing that's just kind of stands out to me is I was there at Microsoft before Satya took the helm with Steve Ballmer. And in fact, I was even there too when Bill Gates was still CEO. I wasn't there for long. I was the intern back then. But I was able to see all three of them. And the Microsoft culture was so different back then under Bill's tenure and Steve's tenure as well. And for Satya to be able to just do a complete 180 on such a large organization, I can't think of any other example where somebody can change the culture so dramatically. But it also just kind of speaks to not only his deft touch, but once again, really good judgment, because I don't know how he was able to tie two and two together, but he somehow figured out that the key to transforming Microsoft's calcified culture was around the fact that he needed them to change their mindset literally. And so you guys have probably heard that really famous book by Carol Dweck called The Growth Mindset. And he just really lasted it out throughout Microsoft. And it's just shocking how he was able to change the culture just by the use of those two words.
Love it. I was also one of those employees during Satya's growth mindset period, and I totally feel exactly what it is that you're sort of putting out there in terms of what makes him such a visionary PM or product leader as well. Again, just for folks who are recently joined, if you do have any questions, please toss them in the chat. We'll be picking up Q&A as we go. There is no dedicated Q&A session as part of our collab programming. So if you have any questions, drop them down so that we can pick them up and continue going. So back to your book a little bit, right? So you're introducing the Esteem method for folks that are in their experience of advancing that PM career. Can you explain a little bit about each of these 6 competencies and why you think they're crucial? And for folks who are listening, now is definitely the time to take notes. Please, Louis.
Yeah, let's see. I wonder if I can share my screen real quickly. Is that possible?
Yeah, it should be.
Let's see here. Let me find it real quick. And then I would just put the link in the chat. Let me do that instead. Sorry, Helen, you've got a super high-powered version of Zoom that I am lost in all of the amazing choices. So let me go ahead and just put the Esteem method right there in the chat window. So hopefully you'll be able to bring up my web page.
Yep, and I can screen share it.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, so what is the Esteem method? For those of you who are familiar with the Code and Conquer, you guys have probably heard of circles, and I just have a thing for frameworks, and I have a thing, um, uh, for acronyms to just make sure that we've got a comprehensive checklist to remind us of, what does it mean to have either a satisfying product design answer or a satisfying PM career. And so Esteem really speaks to the 6 different stages of what it means to be a successful PM. And it is in sequential order. The beginning of the acronym, the E in execution, applies to basically every single level, from entry level IC all the way up to CEO. And then it just kind of builds progressively from there. And so the next skill, superior communication skill, that roughly equates to what you need to be a successful frontline manager, usually like a group product manager. Tactical awareness, it equates to what it needs to be successful at the director level. Mental toughness and building teams, that equates roughly to that GM and VP level. And then finally, moonshot vision is what you need to be just an extraordinary CEO. And yes, I'm one of those folks who, at least in the tech industry, believes like if you're doing it correctly, as you're progressing up your PM career ladder, you should be the CEO of an organization. And going back to the 3 examples that we showed at the beginning of the talk with like Elon and Satya and Mark Zuckerberg, I would claim that all 3 of them in their careers have played a product manager role, even if they haven't held that title, because that's what it takes to be a good CEO of a tech organization, is that you have to be that product steward. And so real quickly, what do these mean? I'm sure you've heard of these terms before. Execution is just the ability to get things done. All right. And I'm sure when you were an entry-level product manager, you see the people around you and you're like, oh yeah, Helen over there, like she's amazing at getting execution, and just everything that we ask her to do, she's just like bing, 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 bing. And it just gets it across the finish line. And so that's what we mean by execution. Communication skills, you normally see that when you're when you start to see some of the ICs, whether at the entry level or the senior level, start to get tapped on the shoulder for leadership roles. And you're like, you know what? Like, I wonder why they were the first ones to be promoted to frontline manager. And you're like, huh, they're really well spoken. And that is absolutely true. And so, having that communication skill set is something that you normally see in good leaders, starting with the front line. It's really a skill set they're just going to need for the rest of your career, all the way up until CEO. Tactical awareness is just a really fancy way of me saying having good judgment. The term tactical awareness, I'm borrowing a little bit from soccer, which is, when you're on the soccer field, just being aware of the situation and the players. Like if you notice that the defender has swiveled their hips a little too much to the left, like you just instinctively, you have that good judgment to know that you're going to have to go to the right, because the time that it takes for them to swivel their hips back from the left to the right, they're not going to have enough time to recover, and you'll be at least like 2 or 3 lengths ahead of them. And so just having that kind of like spatial awareness of the situation and making the right decision, absolutely key. The mental toughness is exactly what I was talking about with Mark Zuckerberg, just being this like relentless Terminator-like character, like you cannot be stopped. The team builder, I think a lot of people mistake that with being a team player, but here we mean it in a different context. With a team builder, it's more about when you're at that VP levels. When a CEO hires a VP of product management, more often than not, they want that VP of product management to replenish the PM organization with the right people. And so, so much of that is, what kind of network you bring to the table that allows you to quickly hire uh, people from your existing network into these new roles. And then a little bit could be about, how can you take the existing structure and make it perform better? And so that, Satya is a great example. Like Satya, when he entered the CEO role, he didn't just do what you see most CEOs do and say, you know what, everybody at Microsoft is damaged goods. I need my own people. So, 150,000 of you, you're fired. I'm going to hire replacements tomorrow. Luckily, Satya was not that insane. Most other CEOs are. He understood that there was just no way that he could replace 150,000 people overnight, and that he had to make the most of the core organization, even though he did make a few selected changes. But for the most part, he was able to take what he had to work with and help them perform at a much, much higher level. Part of it was culture, part of it was instilling new processes. And then finally, the moonshot vision is what we discussed with Elon Musk. It's like, it's not necessary for all the CEOs to have incredible vision. Um, I'll poke a little bit fun at Mark Zuckerberg. Was Mark brilliant in the beginning? Absolutely. Some of the innovations that he unleashed in social media was just breathtaking. It's just stuff that we've never seen before. Um, but more recently, especially in the last 10 years, Mark has had a lot of trouble coming up with a new vision. Um, you know, it's not, to anybody's surprise that a lot of their new innovations that have succeeded lately have been acquisitions, companies like Instagram, WhatsApp, or copying competitors like Snapchat or TikTok. Even now with the metaverse, you would think that the company that spent the most amount of money would be so far ahead of the curve in terms of winning this category, but they haven't. And I'm really referring to Oculus. And so, his ability to set forth a vision to make virtual reality successful is not quite there yet. And so that's an example of somebody whose vision, whose moonshot vision is not quite attuned, which is too bad. He really had that vision in the early days. But, I think Mark would be one of the first to admit that moonshot vision is easier said than done. And that's why Elon gets so much credit. He just seems to be able to conjure new ideas, moonshot ideas, in his sleep, if you will.
In this case with Mark, with what it is that you're saying, do you think it's a matter of, is it that the moonshot vision isn't clear enough because the communication skills aren't necessarily there? Is it the execution, or is it just not the right team? Or is it the wrong vision?
It, I would say the reason he's struggling with vision is it comes to two terms that you guys have heard before, typically in your Meta interviews, which is ironic because he's the CEO of Meta. But maybe that's why he's looking for it so aggressively, is because his customer sense and his product sense is not tuned well. All right. And so customer sense is really about empathy. And that's where, like, the stereotypes are somewhat fair. It's like he doesn't quite understand people well enough to understand what they really want. And because he doesn't know what they want, he chooses the wrong problems to focus on. And so that's why he now needs competition so badly, because let the competitors figure out what the right problem is, and then he'll quickly jump in and copy them. And so if I got my TikTok history correct, TikTok became big partly because of another app which they acquired called Musically. And then Musically had the really amazing consumer insight that said, you know what kids like to do is they like to mimic their favorite celebrities, their favorite artists that they see in the music videos, right? And so that just requires some incredible customer empathy. And it's like, you know what? The kids are doing that already. What kind of software can we create that allows them to mimic those music videos and share them with their community, much, much easier. And that's just not something Mark Zuckerberg would do. Like, he wouldn't know that he's supposed to like dance to Beyonce, film it, and share it with his friends. If he knew that that was something that was gonna be big, he would have done it. And so he doesn't quite understand the customer, number one. And then the other thing that's really problematic about Mark is, um, solutions can come in front of his face, but he doesn't know which solutions actually have market potential. And so there was a thing from Paul Graham, which says, really visionary people, they have good taste. If they see something amazing, they know it's amazing and they'll nurture it. And Steve Jobs was a classic example. There's so many instances of Steve Jobs where a lot of his hit products, whether it's the Mac, whether it's the iPod, whether it's early beginnings of OS X, were all copies of existing products, but that was because he was able to curate and understand the potential of some of these products. Like, he knew that when he saw that first demo at Xerox PARC, that there was something to be said about a graphical user interface, or whichever MP3 company that he envisioned, that was back in the Bay. He's like, he knew that there was something there that could replace the Walkman. And Mark doesn't have that same sense of taste. And as a result, he's chasing after a lot of bets that are not quite right.
Gotcha. Let's swap a little bit to some questions that folks are asking in the chat. So this is a blend between two questions, one from Aki, one from Okeze. So in this case, a lot of PMs, oh, actually, let me also stop sharing. I think for a lot of product people, there's some resistance when it comes to, introducing completely new moonshot ideas or changes. So in this case, how do you suggest product people to overcome that resistance and rally support for their initiatives, especially in environments that are resistant to change, and especially when perhaps the people that were shepherding these ideas have left, or the folks that were supporting you have gone?
It's hard. The easiest way is to quit your company and just start your own company and become CEO, and you can do whatever you want. Um, I know it's a flippant joke, but there's truth to it, and that's why Mark founded his own company, and Elon founded his own company, and Jeff founded his own company, and so on and so forth. Um, it's hard to convince people. It's exhausting to convince people. It's difficult to convince people um, of ideas that they're not able to confirm themselves. And I put myself in the same boat. Outside of my books, I have another software startup, and people will see it when they when they see it that's successful. To use another example, I remember when I wrote before I wrote Decode and Conquer, um, a friend of mine from Google said, like, Lewis, should you really just focus on product management? It seems too niche. And then, well, Helen, now you've got this big organization, CoLab, that trains product managers to be successful. And so a lot of people just can't see potential. And so it's very exhausting to be able to sell somebody on it. Maybe the only effective way is to have some sort of patron within an organization. And the most classical example is Apple's former chief designer, Johnny Ive. And clearly Steve Jobs was his patron. I need to double check my history, but I believe the Apple Watch was not Steve's idea. It was probably Johnny's idea. And Johnny's like, hey, Steve, I want to create this Apple Watch. And because he had proven himself to Steve with the iPhone and its incredible success, Steve was able to greenlight it. So, I'm long story short, I hate to disappoint everyone. Everybody's thinking like, oh, like Lewis, do I convince them with data? Do I convince them with user research? And unfortunately, it's none of the above. the best case scenario is basically to invoke alliances, preferably the alliance. Actually, it's probably almost impossible unless you get an alliance with the CEO. And so the CEO is your patron, then you can probably make it work. But a lot of people can't do that. And so they just end up starting their own companies.
Do you have any tactical advice on how you might make a patron with a CEO? Like, is it as simple as, hey, being in the right meetings? Is it sending the right connection requests, or what is it? And how does it differ if you're at a smaller company versus a larger one?
Yeah. I think that's great because it kind of ties into something that Helen, you and I were kind of trading some emails about, which is uh, the whole sponsor protege um, relationship, which is very different from a mentoring relationship. And so when I hear a lot of folks say, "Hey, I need a mentor," what they really want is they want a sponsor. And it's like, well, gosh, I've never heard the word sponsor. So what's the difference? When I think about mentor, I think about just somebody who's a little bit more senior giving you advice. The really odd thing about mentoring is little bit advice is a dime a dozen. But then even on the mentee perspective, some of the advice, may not be on point, right? Because the person that's giving you the advice may not be close enough to your day-to-day work to give you the most relevant feedback possible. And so most mentoring relationships end up, you know, pretty disappointing because it's not relevant. There's no skin in the game. The sponsor protege relationship overcomes that. And so, what is the sponsor? The sponsor is usually not your boss. It's usually at least your skip level, if not higher. And one of the things that a lot of people miss is that these executives, these sponsors, there's something that they're just dying to do. They have an idea, but given their lack of time, their lack of skills, they can't pull it off themselves. And so they're looking for somebody, the protege, to help them execute their vision. And so often they'll tap somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, this is kind of outside of what your boss wants you to do because I'm like your skip level or I'm the executive or I'm the CEO. Can you do this little project for me or this side project for me? And most people, they're like, no, I don't want to do that because you're signing me up for more work. Life is short. I'm 22. I want to hit the club. See you later, Mr. and Ms. CEO. And that's a fundamental mistake because, those are the opportunities where that relationship is created, where if you help them scratch their back, they understand the rules of the game. Like eventually they'll scratch your back and they'll promote you. Or the next time they have another critical project, they'll say, hey, when we first collaborated, you were just a product manager. Well, now, because the scope is bigger, I'm going to now make you director of product management, and you've got a much, much bigger remit. And then just kind of tying this back to the Johnny Ive example, this is exactly that relationship that he had with Steve Jobs, which was, Steve was just obsessed with creating a brand new phone. Like it wasn't because the BlackBerry was cool. It wasn't because everybody else was screwing up. Like he just had a dream that, whatever sci-fi show he was watching, I think it was the Jetsons, like he just felt like there was an opportunity to create a communicator, as in the words of Steve Jobs, that would completely change the universe. And he was just dying to find some protege to help him realize his vision. And that person happened to be Johnny. And because Johnny pulled through on him, he gave him a blank check with the Apple Watch. So hope that helps.
Totally. And I mean, I think the theme of sponsor versus mentor is something that I don't think a lot of people think about explicitly. And obviously, you can have a mentor within the same company, a sponsor obviously within the same company. What are your thoughts on product coaches? So is this someone that's necessarily not within the same company, and could they also help propel one's journey from
Yeah.
becoming a better PM from with
Yeah.
outside of the corporation?
I don't have a ton of experience with product coaches. But when I think about product coaches, consultants in general, I think one thing that they could do to help an organization is to instill process. And so if you're looking for a product coach to implement a Scrum process or some PRD process, it could be absolutely helpful. And it reminds me of some of my close friends at McKinsey, when they're like, hey, would he ever hire McKinsey? Because he's an ex-McKinsey consultant. Would he ever hire McKinsey for strategy, ideation, M&A analysis? Heck no. But he would absolutely hire them for process reengineering, because if you've worked with enough companies, you get to see a lot of different processes. And if you do have a strong process, being able to transplant that to another organization, could make them so much more effective and efficient. And so if that's what product coaches do, I can definitely see that benefit.
Gotcha. Let's swap to another question pulled from the chat. So a few folks have actually asked about this. I think it was Juan, John, and Amit. So this is relevant to AI. How do you see AI changing the traditional PM role immediately in the near future? And what do you see its impact on layoffs?
Oh, layoffs. Let's just set that one aside for a second, and I'll see if I come back to it. ChatGPT. I love it to death. I love it to death. Man, what a time to be in. Like, I think back on all the sci-fi shows, whether it's, Space Odyssey 2001 or Aliens or Interstellar, like the world did it. Like they created an assistant that um, never sleeps, completely obliges to whatever query or question or task or research item you want. Um, and it literally is like, I don't know, like it's dogs watch out. This Chat GPT is man or woman's best friend. It's just kind of amazing. And so I love it to death. I personally am using Chat GPT like 40 to 50 times a day. Um, if you're not using Chat GPT to that extent, I'm worried. I did Chat GPT is going to be the biggest thing that we talk about for the next 20 to 30 years. Um, I'll be more concrete. 3 weeks ago, I was guest teaching um, product innovation module class for university, and and I was basically going through circles. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with circles, but I cheated aggressively when I was using circles. I basically used ChatGPT for every single step of circles, right? And so, going through circles, like, hey, what is the goal that we're trying to solve? I was like, ChatGPT, we're meta. What is the goal that we're trying to solve? And it pumped out with a bunch of things. And I'm like, awesome. Like in 3 seconds, I was satisfied with ChatGPT's output. I said, okay, guys, we're going forward. Now we need to ask about constraints. And so we asked ChatGPT, what are the constraints? Gave us a bunch of constraints. I'm like, those are good, but try again. That's better. On to the next one. The very second thing is like, hey guys, like ChatGPT, like what kind of personas should we consider, or what should the ICP be? And it gave us like 3. And I said, that's not good enough. Give me 70. And I was like, sure, here's 70. And it just blew the students' mind that I was using ChatGPT so aggressively to walk through the product innovation process. It freaked out the professor a ton. And the students were like, Lewis, it's awesome to see your ChatGPT wizardry, but we want you to solve these questions and tell us what the personas are. Stop cheating and stop using ChatGPT. But that's the punchline. Like, why wouldn't I use ChatGPT, right? Is it possible that I come up with answers better than ChatGPT? Maybe, but I can't do it as fast. I can't come up with 70 personas in 3 seconds, right? Like it'll take me like 6 months maybe, right? And so Um, I feel flattered that people are like, hey, Lewis, I want you to solve circles unaided. Um, but why wouldn't we use an amazing tool like ChatGPT? And so, it it should change. I hope you guys work for organizations that embrace ChatGPT. Um, Microsoft is at the top of the list, um, because once again, Satya's good judgment. He's got an amazing uh, exclusive partnership with OpenAI, and he absolutely wants his team to embrace it. And so you probably have the most latitude at Microsoft to use ChatGPT through and through. Um, Possibly Google, especially now that they have their own, ChatGPT competitor. But then I worry about organizations like Amazon, where I'm pretty sure they're like, no, don't use ChatGPT, don't use Gemini, because we're afraid of sending data that way. And so I hope you're in an organization that embraces it, because um, you know, how would it change product management? Exactly the same way that you see it in the movies, which is it's your best PM buddy. And so I'll just kind of leave it at that. Um, Layoffs. I don't know. It's hard for me to put my head around, like, you know, are 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 the robots, ChatGPT, just kind of completely replace us? Um, it more positive is just think like it's just going to change the way that we work. Um, as PMs, um, the last time I checked, ChatGPT is not a sentient individual. All it is just predicting um, the next set of words, if you will. And it's not a stretch to say it's helping me predict my next set of thoughts, right? It knows circles, and so it knows that after I consider all of the different customer segments and personas, that I'm going to ask about pain points, and then it'll spit out a bunch of pain points. And then it'll know that after I spit out a bunch of pain points, that I'm going to want to prioritize them. And so, I would just think of it as like it's symbiotic. Like, we really shouldn't be replaced. If there's anything that's super helpful to just kind of put our heads around ChatGPT, it's this. Um, and I think it's pretty rewarding for us to think of it this way, which is the people who are going to be more adept at ChatGPT are the ones who have more knowledge. Okay, and so whatever you do to invest in your knowledge, it's going to make you more effective in ChatGPT. And the best analogy is this, which is I think about ChatGPT no different from a tool like a guitar. Just because uh, Jimi Hendrix, famous guitarist, and I have the same exact guitar, doesn't mean I'm going to come up with the same music as Jimi Hendrix. Like, my gosh, that guy's a legend. Um, he knows so much about musical theory. He has so many thousands and thousands of hours on the guitar. I've got like a minute on the guitar. Um, our performance is going to be so variable. His experiences in terms of his childhood and how it shaped him is going to lead him to produce music from the guitar in a very different way than I can. And so, knowing that, I would kind of use that same analogy as like, hey, the people that I've seen who are more successful at getting good output out of ChatGPT are the ones who are more knowledgeable.
Gotcha. We're at around 15 minutes left, so I have just a few more questions. Nicholas asked, what are some of your most defining experiences and lessons learned that propelled your own personal career forward?
Oh boy, so many lessons learned. Where do I start? Um, and you guys can feel free if there's very specific examples in your own careers. Feel free to ask, and I'd be happy to chime in. Um, I know a lot of us are working in corporate, and I think one of the most important things I've learned at Microsoft really is just the importance of sharing visibility into your work. I think it's so easy coming out of university to think like, hey, if I'm smart, if I get the right result on a problem set or on an assignment, then I'm going to get an A. And going to the corporate world, that kind of mindset doesn't quite work. Like, you need to influence others. Sometimes it's your boss, sometimes it's your peers, sometimes it's your CEO. And the only way that you do that is to just kind of yell from the rooftops in terms of like what you're doing. And so it feels exhausting to constantly be broadcasting updates and progress and results. Um, but I don't want you guys to think that it's, oh, corporate. I hate corporate. I think it's fair to say it's a part of doing big things. When you do big things, it's going to involve a lot of people, and to make sure that everybody is marching to the same beat, they have to have a common base of knowledge. And the only way they're going to have a common base of knowledge is if you take the effort to promote that knowledge. And so, if you're in corporate, visibility is kind of the super important thing. And then just speaking of corporate, um, one of my more controversial takes, but I don't know why it's controversial, um, in my book is the importance of power in politics. And so I won't go too deep into that. You guys can absolutely refer to it in the book. But maybe the most constructive way to think about it, and every time I bring it up, somebody's like, oh, well, no, you can succeed in the working world based off of merit. This politics thing that Lewis is talking about, like, no, that doesn't exist. And I don't know why people keep sweeping it under the rug. It exists, um, because they've seen it work. They've seen politics work, not in a corporation, but growing up as kids. When you lobby your parents for something and you lobby well, whether it's constant badgering or emotional manipulation, like, mom, I'll only love you if you get me best. Or when you're retired and you need help, I won't help you unless you get me a BMW. Like, those things work. Like, your mom or dad are like, oh, okay, I'll get you the BMW. Right. And so no need to sweep it under the rug. Power in politics is something that you've been doing since the age of 3. If you haven't, then your brothers and sisters probably did it, and that's why they got the BMW and you didn't. Um, and so maybe the most constructive way to think about it is whether or not you want to choose to use power in politics is up to you, right? Like, do you have to emotionally manipulate your mom to get a BMW? You don't have to. You can get it some other way. You can work a secondary job and save and buy the BMW on your own. No thanks to mom. Um, but I think this is the useful thing for all of us, which is it's important for us to understand power in politics so that when it's used against us, we know what to do. All right. We don't have to do it ourselves, but when it's used against us, we're not like, oh my God, like, why did my brother or sister able to like emotionally manipulate my mom into getting the BMW? Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And like, woe is me. And why am I cursed? And why am I not the favorite child? And it's like, no, you idiot. Your brothers and sisters had some really special skills to get what they want. And because you don't have those skills, that's why you have to work the second job, Lois. So don't pity yourself. Your brothers and sisters are talented for a reason. And so just kind of keep that in mind. I hate for you guys to be naive and think like, oh, but I'm not the favorite son or daughter. It's like, no, you just don't have the skills.
Was that you as a child? Did you get that BMW?
Never had a BMW, but if you ask my sister, I think she would claim that I was the golden eldest son. So she might feel that way. I did I have any tricks up my sleeve? I don't know. Like, I was a kid, so if I did, I wasn't aware of it. But yeah, but I'm glad that analogy was able to resonate.
Hmm. Um, in your book and a lot of what you mentioned today, it sort of takes someone through their journey as a product manager, a product leader, and eventually CEO. And obviously that's what you yourself have also done, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey going from product person into CEO and just share a little bit about how that is going so far?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know you didn't ask a specific question, but it makes me reflect. I'm like, Lois, if you're to grade yourself against the Esteem framework, where are you ahead and where are you behind? Um, uh, I'll start with the positives, but it's so easy for me to start with the negatives. Um, here's a really interesting thing. I think when people meet me, people say like, "Oh wow, Lewis, you're really analytical or you're really smart." Um, but if I, you know, between friends, if you ask me deep down inside, I feel like my biggest strength is my communication skills. Um, I know it doesn't seem like it, like Lewis, you're so blunt and you don't sound like an executive. Um, but I've definitely spent a lot of time over the years to work really hard to make sure that how I communicate, even though it's not elegant, is clear and unmistakable and makes an impact. And so um, that's why I use dramatic stories like BMWs and colorful language like emotional manipulation, because I'm trying to make an impact. You might not hear executives use that kind of language. They might be scared to use analogies like BMW emotional manipulation, but I know that I need you guys to remember, and that's why I use language like that. So I think that's my natural strength is the second part of esteem. Um, the moonshot vision I've had to work quite a bit on. Um, because for manage better, for us to stand out in the marketplace, blue ocean strategy, we have to be very, very unique. And so I've definitely had to cultivate my inner Steve Jobs. Um, wasn't always empathetic, but spent a lot of time working on it. I have the therapy bills to prove it. Um, and then the product ideation, that's just a grind. Like, you cannot build the iPhone overnight. I think Steve Jobs admitted himself it was like 192 prototypes. And so, those are the things that I'm probably stronger at these days. What am I weak at? Step one, the execution. Oh, Helen, I'm sure I can't I kind of imagine like if I were to compare like your inbox and your calendar versus my inbox, my calendar, you're probably just grinding through and just getting things done like nobody's business. And I wish I could do that, but I'm kind of those typical like, bright shiny objects and get distracted. And so it's not a good flaw. Um, it's important to get things done. It's important to stick with your priorities and not get distracted and not be lose focus. But that definitely is a weakness of mine for sure. Um, I guess the last thing on the esteem framework is this. I think when you see like 6 different stages, it's easy to think like, oh, Lewis is implying that I need to be good at all 6, but that's not the case. Um, we kind of, revealed to all of you like Mark Zuckerberg, um, another person is Sundar Pichai. They don't have the moonshot vision at all. They're really struggling, and people can see it. But are they not successful? Oh, look at Meta. Like the stock has only gone up like what 400% in the last year and a half. You don't need moonshot vision to be successful. You don't need a moonshot vision to be, you know, CEO of $1 trillion company. But it'd be nice because it allow you to be a Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, a Jeff Bezos type person. Same thing with some of the other things. Like, do you have to have good judgment? I've seen CEOs, Steve Ballmer is one of them, who had really bad judgment, and he was CEO, not a good one, but it didn't prevent, you know, him from getting fired for many, many decades. And so I think for most of us, just focusing on the first two, like be relentless at getting things done, and then having really sharp communication skills, just those two alone will take us a very, very long way.
Got it. I mean, we only have 3 minutes left. So, Lewis, I want to make sure that we end on time. Inquiring minds want to know, what are you up to these days? Are you working on any new content, any new books, or are you working specifically on Manage Better? And if so, what are some things we could help you with as a collective?
Yeah. Manage better is absolutely top of mind for me these days. In case you guys are wondering, who knows? Maybe I just have to live up to circles or being a PM. I've got my own HR tech startup called Manage Better, and what it is we've discovered a new way to do performance reviews. You probably know the traditional performance reviews have a lot of writing. Well, we've completely changed all of that. No writing involved. You simply just click on choices, and voila, the performance reviews appear. And so you don't have to deal with writer's block. You don't have to just like struggle to figure out and formulate your words. And so super pumped. I've got my fingers crossed. We've been working on it for a while. Hopefully we can, change the world. Not only help people get through performance reviews faster, but really just more accurately assess everybody's contributions so that we don't have to default to biases and say, oh, Lewis is talented because he wrote books. Like I can write books and not be talented and things like that. And there's too much of the world because we're moving so fast. We're constantly resorting to biases and saying sloppy things like, "Oh, so and so must be smart because they went to Waterloo," or "So and so is, you know, talented because they were partying in the same circles." It's some, luminary, and we hope to change all of that. So if you guys know anybody who's interested in being like a technical co-founder of a startup, we are actually looking for a technical co-founder for Manage Better. And so you can email me. I'll flash real quickly my email address if you guys have any thoughts. And so, yeah, that would be a fantastic help.
Ooh, love the background. And for anyone that is curious, and also Lewis, for your reference, we'll be sending out all of these links as well, including to Manage Better, and seeing if anyone is interested or has any information or thoughts, we can field them your way as well. So we are now 1 minute before the end of this event. Lewis, I wanted to thank you so much on behalf of everyone here. Thank you for giving us your time, as well as some of your hard-hitting thoughts. I think it was great. I took a bunch of notes for myself that I'm also going to share. And for everyone that's here, obviously we had linked sort of a LinkedIn thread. Feel free to go and connect with everyone else that have shown up to this call. We had over 180 people for the entirety of the conversation. And keep an eye out on your email tomorrow for who is going to win a few copies of Lewis's most latest book. But yeah, Lewis, thank you again so much. And everyone, have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for showing up, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Helen. Bye, guys.